All right, I will use the YouVersion app for us to read the text, and I think that this is a recording. I think it's better than my reading, so I will have it read here. Okay. Okay.
Nehemiah 6. When word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall, and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors and the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message: Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. But they were scheming to harm me, so I sent messengers to them with this reply: I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. Then the 5th time Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was an unsealed letter in which was written, It is reported among the nations, and Geshem says it is true, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you are building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become their king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king, so come, let us meet together. I sent him this reply: Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking, their hands will get too weak for the work, and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. One day I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut in at his home. He said, Let us meet in the house of God, inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night they are coming to kill you. But I said, Should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done. Remember also the prophet Noadiah, and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me. So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. Also in those days, the nobles of Judah were sending many letters to Tobiah, and replies from Tobiah kept coming to them. For many in Judah were under oath to him, since he was son-in-law to Shechaniah, son of Arah, and his son Jehohanan had married the daughter of Meshullam, son of Berechiah. Moreover, they kept reporting to me his good deeds, and then telling him what I said, and Tobiah sent letters to intimidate me. Nehemiah 7. After the wall had been rebuilt, and I had set the doors in place, the gatekeepers, the musicians, and the Levites were appointed. I put in charge of Jerusalem my brother Hanani, along with Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, because he was a man of integrity and feared God more than most people do. I said to them, The gates of Jerusalem are not to be opened until the sun is hot. While the gatekeepers are still on duty, have them shut the doors and bar them. Also appoint residents of Jerusalem as guards, some at their posts and some near their own houses. Now the city was large and spacious, but there were few people in it, and the houses had not yet been rebuilt.
All right. Let's see. Okay, that is the reading from Nehemiah chapter 6 and to chapter 7 and verse 3. Let's look at the text a little bit here. And okay. All right. And now, remember in chapter 5, there was some internal situation between the internal situation that the rich between the rich people and the poor people, and cause some form of disunity and division within the community. And anyway, Nehemiah was able to resolve it, and so we come back to the situation of rebuilding the wall. And in chapter 6, we come to the final stages of the wall being rebuilt. So here the situation is this, and the word came, and that to the enemies of the Israel of the Judea, of the Jews, that there was Sanballat, and there was Tobiah, there was Geshem the Arab, and the rest of the enemies. And they received word that Nehemiah has basically in the process of completing the wall, and all the gaps have been filled up. There was no gap left in it. Although up to that time he has not set the doors in the gates. Usually the doors and they decided not to set the doors because it will complicate, it will delay the building the wall. So build the entire wall and everything is fixed. Then they can have skilled workers to put up the doors. Otherwise, they might make adjustments and that will cause some delays. So, and that was the last thing. And the gates, the doors and the gates have not yet been set. And the enemies felt that at this time, then there is, sense there's no way that they can surprise attack because it's quite quite secure. So, but they were worried that they will be able to complete the project, and they don't want that to happen. So now they have to change their tactics. They tried to intimidate them, they could not, and so now they try a different different tactic. So Sanballat and Geshem. It is interesting that Tobiah is not mentioned here. There are many theories about that. One of that is that, and in verse 1, something that some people think that the word Tobiah is actually not there, and it was added in by later scribes, and or something that Tobiah and somehow for various reasons that we were he was not, and probably he was not one of the main characters, whatever it is, or that he was not agreeable to a plan to attack, and he has other ways of trying to disrupt the work. But whatever it is, he was Sanballat and Geshem. And maybe the idea is that, if three people are, if Nehemiah was to meet with three people, that may be intimidating. So why not just meet two people? And that would be more amenable to Nehemiah. But whatever is the reason, it was the two of them, Sanballat and Geshem, that the Samaritan and the Arab sent Nehemiah the message, "Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono." The plain of Ono is a region somewhere in the northwest of the northwest of Jerusalem, about 20, 25, 30 miles away. It is probably a neutral territory of sort. It is not part of Judah. It is not part of Samaria. It is in Sidon, but that is also kind of a hostile, not really friendly, but maybe not so hostile, and so maybe a neutral ground that they able to kind of meet. There was no reason given, but come, let's meet together. Let's consider, let's settle our differences, Let's work it out. After all, we are neighbors. We can come to a reasonable arrangement, a first treaty, and that sounds very reasonable. But as far as Nehemiah felt, discerned somehow, and probably then it's true, then he's accurate in his assessment that they were trying, scheming to do him harm. Probably they intend to kidnap him and then maybe even to kill him. And if they now these are all Persian officials, and if we assassinate him, then in the city there might be repercussions. But if Nehemiah was traveling to area that's out of his jurisdiction, they could make a plausible reason that somehow he was kidnapped and he was assassinated, killed by bandits or something like that. Something like what Joseph brothers and told their father when they sold him over to the Ishmaelites and to the Arab traders, and it was brought to Egypt. So that is something that probably they could think that they could do. And but Nehemiah was wise to the what we call schemes, whether he had inside information or whether he has suspicions, and we don't really know. And but he said that they were scheming to harm me. So I sent messages with reply. I'm carrying on a great project. I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? So this is kind of a diplomatic reply, and probably Nehemiah doesn't want to give the impression that he knew of their plans, and he suspected the what we call evil intention, the schemings. So he came up with a plausible 10 reasons. I'm doing some great work. I'm doing some and very important project, great project. I can't just leave. I can't leave everything because, and if I leave, everything will cease. And so why should I do that? Now, just going back a little bit, and probably the Sanballat and Geshem have come to realization that the main person, the main factor for rebuilding the wall was Nehemiah. They tried intimidating them, they tried to frighten them, and they were successful several years ago, and in the book of Ezra, and they sent what we call and they ought to stop the work. But Nehemiah was a tougher leader, and they felt that he was the one. If they can get rid of him, then the rest is easy to be done. So here is one sense that the leader is so responsible for entire work. And so I think they guessed correctly that if they can get rid of Nehemiah, if they can get rid of this leader, this strong leader, then the rest will be easy for them to stop the work that they have. And but Nehemiah says, no, why should I stop work? Why should I leave it? I go down to you. And it takes about a day to travel there, a day to travel back, a day or more to meet. So it's half a week. Actually, then for half a week, for a few days to stop work is not that big a deal, but still is significant. So it has a certain plausibility. But Sanballat and Geshem were determined 4 times, not 2 times or 3 times, 4 times they sent the same message, and each time Nehemiah sent back the same answer. Then finally, in the fifth time, they changed the tack a little bit. They try diplomacy. They try to say, let's reason out together. Let us meet together, and let us trash out. And then the fifth time, he sent his assistant, he sent his minor official, his aide with the same message. But this time, in his hand was unsealed letter, open letter, and not sealed, and open letter, so the messenger knows what's letter, and the people can see. And that open letter is not kind of a private message, but kind of open letter. and so that the effect is that the people in Jerusalem and in Judea will know the contents of that letter, and this is probably to effect some kind of a pressure on Nehemiah and to come to terms and to effect a meeting. And so the letter says it was reported among the nations, and Geshem, say the Arab, and says it is true that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt. Therefore, you are building the wall. And moreover, according to these reports, you are to become their king, and even appointed prophets to make proclamation about you in Jerusalem, that there's a king in Judah. And now this report will go back to the king. So come, let us meet together. Let us help out one another. And otherwise, it kind of spread a rumor. And now that kind of a report is not altogether implausible. Jerusalem had a reputation of revolt, and there's also what we call messianic expectations. And when Hagar and Zechariah, then there was some indications that Zerubbabel was called God's anointed. So there's kingship aspirations. So, and in that sense, there was this what we call nervousness about Persian. Now, the governors that the Persian has, the king in Persia cannot rule over the entire empire. He will have satraps, which are regional governors. And not too recently, there were certain governors that revolted. And Artaxerxes has to put down a revolt in Egypt. And so it is not necessarily an uncommon thing. And it's not implausible thing for a governor decide to have ambitions of his own and decide to carve out his own independent nation, kingdom. And even though Nehemiah was one of the trusted officials, he was a king's cupbearer, he was a high official, but he's a Jew. He goes back to his Jewish people, and he might see the situation, and he might have change of heart. And this kind of rumor can have adverse effects, and the king, Persian king, could actually believe it. So it was a real threat. It was a blackmail. So they are saying that there are reports. They're it's kind of indirectly. Sanballat is not saying that they are doing this, and it was reported among the various peoples and the various nations. And Geshem, the Arab, and say it is true. These reports are going around, and that you and the Jews are plotting. I don't really believe it, but that is this rumor that's floating around. That's what Sanballat is trying to say. And then there's also a report that you have prophets that going around making a proclamation. There's a king in Judah, and surely this report will get back to the king. So let us come and let's be together and let us see a way to protect you. That kind of a thing. So, and now for the people, then this kind of an open letter probably is meant to cause alarm, and it's meant to cause what we call a fear. And if this thing goes back, and even though it is not true, and but just a mere rumor. I think, and in Malaysia, we have this kind of poison letters that go out, and this kind of report goes out, and so is doing this, so this is, and this, and movement, this, and this what we call, and this kind of things are going on, and so any kind of what we call news of rebellion or revolt can be very devastating. But Nehemiah know his situation, his conscience clear, and he just simply said, nah, nothing like what you are saying is happening. You're just making this out of your own head. This is a figment of imagination. There's nothing. So he basically called a bluff, and there's nothing of this sort. And I'm not afraid, and I trust my king. My king trusts me, and I'm not worried about this. And basically, they're saying that they are trying to frighten us. That's what probably he's telling his people. They are trying to frighten us, thinking that if we then take this seriously, our hands will get too big, the work will not be completed. But I pray, now strengthen my hands. Uh, some versions and has and for example ESV and puts on, but now, oh God, strengthen my hands. And there was, oh God, here is not in the original, but it is what we call inserted there to make this a prayer. Others, I think that new and living translations and says that, and so I continued the work with even greater determination. So it takes it and basically I think the new RSV says no. It was the ESV. King James, I think, says makes a prayer. The New Living Translation and follow some scholars, and they basically things that, and let's see, we are back here until letter. Okay, okay. When it says now strengthen my hands, now strengthen my hands here. This is a prayer. Because it says strengthen my hands, and so abrupt, and so certain translations says, oh God, now strengthen my hands, pray to God. The New Living Translation and translator says that this is, and Nehemiah says that I strengthened my hands. I became more determined. Most likely, I think the major translations got it better right, that this is basically a prayer. And I think I kind of interesting that the NIV tried to be as literal as the original text and didn't try to put, and as the ESV did, or the New King James says, and put oh God. The ESV also says, and now oh God, and the ESV then oh God. Net Bible then the same with the NIV. The new RSV then say oh God. All right. So there are these people that says NIV is not so literal, ESV is more literal. This is one occasion that, and the NIV is much more literal than the ESV. So he refused to be frightened. He refused to fall into the trap. He refused to fall into their schemes, because if we go up again, they will try to kidnap him. They'll try to and do him harm, and they'll try to sabotage the project. Anyway, that was not all that happened. See, and there was different tactic, and here was something that Tobiah did rather than Geshem and Sanballat. And although Sanballat was probably the one behind the whole thing, but it was something that probably Tobiah was and more responsible. So one day he went to the house of Shemaiah. Who is this Shemaiah? Shemaiah was probably a prophet. So in verse 11, he said he prophesied against me. So son of Deliah and the son of Mehetabel, who was shut in his home. This phrase "shut in his home" has occasioned quite a lot of it called and speculation, and why is he shut in? Well, some versions and the King James are very interesting and take on these few words. Instead of saying shut in, the New King James says that he was a secret informer, and so he was a spy, something like that. But most others says he was confined. He was shut up. He was confined. He was confined. Why was he confined? Why was he shut up in his home? There are various theories and various, and although the text never tells us why it was. Maybe he had some what we call impurity. Then he then did something and had to be isolated, or he was sick, or maybe is part of. Then he shut himself up because that's part of his plot. He was frightened, and so he basically shut inside, and so he could not go to see Nehemiah. He was sent word to Nehemiah, and Nehemiah and came to see him in his house. And so when he went, and Shemaiah says, "Let us meet in the house of God inside the temple. Let us close the temple doors because men are coming to kill you by night, and they're coming to kill you today." Now, most of the versions doesn't seem to have and make what we call make any indication about the special nature of these words. They just say, "Let us meet." ESV, "Let us meet," and ESV says, "Let us meet," and Net Bible says, "Let's meet." RSV also, "Let us meet." New Living Translation, "Let us meet." But the Jewish Bible, I think, is more accurate in putting these words in poetical form. And the indication is that when Nehemiah came to visit and where he was housebound, immediately he uttered this prophecy. And many times in Old Testament, prophecy is in poetical form. So can you imagine, if you're talking about a Pentecostal situation, you go to the house, immediately the person says, "Thus said the Lord," and he uttered a prophecy. So this is a prophetic word that he's saying. "Let us meet the house of God inside the sanctuary. Let us shut the doors in the sanctuary, for they're coming to kill you. By night, they're coming to kill you." And so this was supposed to be a prophetic word. And he acted as a prophet. But Nehemiah replied, says, "No, should a man like me run away? Should someone let me go into the temple to save his life? I would not go." Okay. Then he said he realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah, here you find that Tobiah is mentioned first, and Sanballat had hired him. He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Two things here, and that I think then they were trying to do to Nehemiah. Nehemiah, if he goes into the house secretly and shut himself out, he will prove himself to be a coward. And how can a coward then inspire courage in the people? And it will be let out that there was assassins, and instead of being bold, he then went to hiding then because there were assassins out him. So his reputation will be damaged because he has been telling the people to be courageous. He has been telling the people to not be afraid. He has the people to trust God, and he go and hide in the temple. The second thing that is probably most serious is that Nehemiah was a layperson. He's not a priest. And Shemaiah, who could have been a priest as well as a prophet, not say that he is a priest, and there's no indication. But he's saying, "Let us meet at the house of God inside the temple." Now, in the Old Testament, when you are trying to what we call escape from the avenger of blood, you can go to the temple courts and the altar and lay your hands on the altar and be protected. That is someone who is coming to revenge you for involuntary manslaughter, not murder, but involuntary manslaughter. You can get what we call a refuge and then protection. But that is the altar is outside the temple proper. No lay person can go inside the holy place, the sanctuary. And no person can go inside the most holy place except the high priest, only once a year. But the holy place, that is a sanctuary, the temple of God, the house of God, is limited to what we call the priests. only the priest can go in. If you try to go in, you incur the judgment of God. Uzzah and Uzziah, the of course the king during Isaiah time went in to try to perform that ritual, and he went in and he was struck down with leprosy. He was not struck down with dead, but he was punished by God. So to ask Nehemiah, who is a layperson, for safety's sake, to violate the law of God, to go into the priest in the house, he probably would endanger his own life. That's why he said, and should someone let me go into the temple to save his life, he will die. He'll be struck down. Say, I will not go. And even more so, I think as we have indicated in the past and in one of the previous lectures, that most probably Nehemiah was a eunuch. He would have been a eunuch and to serve as the wine and the cupbearer to the Persian king, and even more and blasphemous and what we call and impossible for a eunuch layperson to go into the temple, and so that would be committing a sin. He had been hired to intimidate so that I will commit a sin by doing this, and then they will give me a bad name to discredit me. Perhaps if you go there and for the purpose of saving his life, and even if he's escaped and punishment, and somehow God has mercy on him and he didn't die, he would have been discredited. So he refused to fall into this trap, and he realized that Shemaiah was a false prophet. A prophet was hired and to prophesy against him, and probably when he went in good faith. Maybe he felt that Shemaiah had some word from God for him, but when he hears this, whether he saw that he was asked, and this prophecy is telling Nehemiah to do something that is against the law, he must be a false prophet. Now today, there are many people who call themselves prophets. And there are many people in the church that somehow had what we call a kind of a inordinate respect for prophets. Prophets must be some people higher, and they are spokesmen for God, and they are higher, they are more spiritual than even what we call the pastors and or evangelists, and so they gave a lot of what we call and highly respected as prophets. We need to know that just because they're called a prophet, they are not infallible and they're not incorruptible. In the Old Testament, there were many prophets, and many of the prophets were false prophets. Today, there are also prophets. There are true prophets, yes, but there are also prophets who are false, and there are prophets who may be true but corrupted or corruptible, just because they have been used by God and before in the past, and they have given them tremendous prophecies that came true, that came right, speak the word of God. But these people can be corrupted with money, with position, with whatever, or blackmailed and into speaking a word that is not the word of God. So the Old Testament, here we find that Nehemiah probably went and in all we call good faith to Shemaiah's house, and then encountered a prophecy. By the prophecy, he discerned that it's not of God, and then he realized that God not sent him, but he has been hired, probably by Tobiah and Sanballat. He had been hired to intimidate him. So he says, Lord, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done. But then also in verse 14, you'll find that remember also the prophet Noadiah and how she and the rest of the prophets. Now, there is a prophet who was a woman, prophet and prophetess, and a prophets, and not just a man, but prophet is also women. And I like the way the NIV translates it. Is a prophet, while the other translation says is a prophetess. The prophetess and NIV and New and the prophetess. Sometimes the word prophetess can give the impression is a prophet's wife. It's like see and Moxie and Simo, but to say is a prophet, this lady, this woman is a prophet in a prophetess in her own right. And I think that she and how the rest of the prophets have tried to intimidate me. So, and Shemaiah is not the only prophet. They're somehow been hired, or maybe they have the other reasons for trying. So even though we do get impression in some sense, and that Nehemiah got what we called the majority of the people in line and organized and united to rebuild the wall, there were still pockets of resistance. And these are indications that not everybody is really, really we call in line with united with Nehemiah. Nehemiah was probably a very what we call stern, very conservative, and a very rigid, very what we called and decided we have nothing to do with our neighbors. We have nothing to do with Samaritans. We have nothing to do with these half Jews. We have nothing with this nominal Jewish people. We must keep ourselves pure. And he was probably devoted in a very religious way and committed to the purity of the nation. But some people, even the prophets, were probably a little bit more liberal, a little bit more what we call willing to compromise, and some would say more generous to their neighbors and say, oh, we can still be faithful to God, but we don't have to be so rigid. We don't have to be so strict. And so they were the ones who are trying to undermine Nehemiah. And they're trying, and by intimidating him with various means. Verse 14 doesn't tell us what other ways they're trying to intimidate and trying to cause fear. Maybe various other prophecies come, and so that didn't work. So the war was completed on the 25th day of Elul in 52 days. Remarkable. 52 days is less than 2 months. So if they have done it, if then Nehemiah then went and started the work in July, he would have and completed it somewhere in September or October. In fact, the New Living Translation says that on the 2nd of October, and so on the lunar calendar, this is 2nd October 2555 BC, quite what we call this day. So others are not so certain, but it is somewhere in autumn. That Josephus, the first century historian, counted this, and where he got his sources, we are not certain, but he says that the building of the wall take more than 2 years, 4 months, and some modern scholars, radical scholars, and give more credence to Josephus, but I think most scholars, including non-evangelical scholars, non-conscious scholars, I think that 52 days is okay, is and pretty right, and because of certain considerations, it's probably likely that the wall was not that badly damaged, and there was still parts that were standing, Then in the most severely damaged parts of the wall and on the eastern side, and we look at the construction in chapter 3, Nehemiah probably decided to forego that section and rebuild a new what we call wall and that and a cut through and abandon the wall that seemingly too difficult to what we call and demanding to what we call and to repair. Archaeological discoveries by archaeologists found that the wall is not that what we call great a project. It was not what we call something that was a grand kind of a wall that would take a long time to build. It was built quite hastily. It was strong, yes, but it is not the most what we call massive wall, the building. So biblical scholars who excavated area and confirmed that the possibility of building the wall within 52 days is quite plausible, especially in what we call in line of the urgency. Nehemiah has what we call at least two reasons to do it quickly. He cannot be away for too long because he is a Persian official that's needed by the king. And if he asked for a too long a time to away, and the king probably would not let him go. And although we find that somehow he was able to extend, and his stay had became appointed as governor instead, and maybe he went back and came back with no commission. We don't know the details, and and also the need to rebuild the wall quickly in case what we call the enemies try to. The sooner you rebuild the wall, the less opportunity for the what we call the enemies to try to disrupt the building and for them to gather the army, gather what we call attackers and getting plans. So when you do the wall as quickly as possible, it prevents what we call the disruption by the enemies. So anyway, when the enemies heard all about this, that the walls have been rebuilt, completed, the walls and the doors all done, the nations were all afraid, and a better translation, they were all in awe. They lost their self-confidence. They realized that the work has been done with the help of our God. And definitely for Judah to build a wall in Jerusalem and would somehow reduce the what we call influence over that area. Now there is a powerful and community, even though it is part of a province of Persian, and they are still part of the Persian Empire, but different provinces will have rivalry between one another, just as in any what we call country in any way in Malaysia. There are rivalry between what we call Selangor and Johor and Malacca and things like that, and there are certain form of rivalries. In the United States, you'll find that certain states are rival to one another and certain places. So to have in the middle and in a very strategic what we call crossroads, Jerusalem and Judea, and would diminish the influence of the other like Samaria and Ammon and Sidon and Arabia. And they were, but they realized this was done with the help of our God. So this is important to note that Nehemiah, who is reporting this, did not claim credit for it. And even though he's one responsible, he says this work has been done with the help of our God. And then verse 17 to the end of the chapter is kind of a footnote and not necessarily after the situation. He's also in those days, that is in the 52 days that they were doing, and referring to those days, the nobles of Judah were sending many letters to Tobiah. And letters on Tobiah kept coming to them. So Tobiah, even though he was not one of them, and in the earlier chapter, Tobiah was called Tobiah the Ammonite. Many scholars do not think that he is an Ammonite, but rather he's a Jewish official appointed by Persian Empire to govern Ammon, which somehow has been incorporated into the. And so most, I think the majority of scholars think that Tobiah is Jewish, or at least half Jewish in certain sense, because the word Tobiah is a Jewish name. It means that God is good, and his sons and Jehonan, God is gracious, and then is give indication that most likely he can be a Jew or Jewish convert or whatever it is, a nominal Jew. Uh, you find that in earlier chapter when he was asked to then later we're asked to what we call in Ezra to then remove what we call the foreign wives. Tobiah was not accused of intermarriage, and so he is probably a Jew that is a governor in Ammon and somehow has interest in Judea, and he has many connections. He was son-in-law to Shekinah, son of Ara, and his Johanan married a daughter of Meshullam, son of Barakiah, and which were listed in what we call among the nobility and in the earlier listings. And so he has connection with the nobles, with the nobility, with the upper class, with the upper middle class or upper class, which probably, if you look at basically social makeup, the common people are probably the ones that basically wants to be faithful to God and want to serve God and want to be then to keep the identity. But the nobility, they are the ones who are educated and who has uh, interest in trade, interest in international relations, and they want to be a little bit more open. And they are the ones who are probably the most unhappy with Nehemiah to come. And probably they no wall, never mind, no temple, never mind. And as long as they can do whatever they want to do, and they are not so zealous for God. And so they are connected with Tobiah. And not only Tobiah, they are under oath to him. They are under oath to him. They have these connections. They have these treaties and these what we call and commitments to him. And he is governor and of Ammon, and so he is and a high and to get contracts, to get what we call trade routes, things like that. And they were reporting back, and so they were sending letters to Tobiah, giving information. Tobiah sending them to them, and they keep reporting to me his good deeds. They're still these people, these nobles, are telling how good Tobiah is. He's actually not a bad guy, and he's really and looking for the interests of the community, and he's looking for the economic interests. He's looking for what we call and that we don't want to be unfriendly with our neighbors because that would cause problems. And then they were telling him, they were telling Tobias and giving information, whatever they discuss, whatever they say, because definitely Nehemiah, being the governor or being the appointed governor, and for the time, governor pro tem or whatever it is at this time, and would have to deal with this nobility. So then, and even Tobiah would send letters to intimidate me, and we have no access to what content what Tobiah wrote, and so we can speculate that maybe Tobiah is trying to try to undermine Nehemiah in a lot of different ways. So Tobiah, even though he may be he probably would not be then all in trying to kidnap and what we call Nehemiah or do him harm, but he would want to undercut and Nehemiah and in a different way. That's probably why he was not listed, and his name was not there in verse 2 when they had this plot to try to kidnap and assassinate and Nehemiah. And okay, whatever it is, okay. Now, after the wall was rebuilt, the doors set in place, gatekeepers, musicians, Levites were appointed. I put in charge my brother Hanani, along with Hananiah, the commander of the citadel, and what we call the castle, because he was a man of integrity and fear. Just because you're the walls up, you're the doors done, I think Nehemiah doesn't feel that and is absolute security. And he needs loyal people. He needs what we call the people in Jerusalem, the Jebusites, and thought that it was secured. And when David's men and infiltrated the city and took it, and without too much bloodshed. And so basically, then Nehemiah knows his history, and he cannot be less than vigilant. So he said to them, the gates of Jerusalem are not to be opened until the sun is hot. And while the gatekeepers are still on duty, have them shut the doors and bar them before they close and before they go, and have to shut them and close and shut the doors before they go off duty. And so this is what I think, and the Jewish basically translate. I said to them, the gates of Jerusalem are not to be open until the heat of day, and before you leave the post, let the doors be closed and be barred, and let assign inhabitants of Jerusalem to watches, each man and to his watch in front of his own house. So this is the ancient Rukun Tetangga, and residential and patrol, and so they to be vigilant and in doing that. So this is a situation with Nehemiah. We're able to what we call rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and provide what we call security for the people. Okay. All right. Okay. Next week we will look at chapter 7, and which is okay. All right. That's it for tonight, and my talk, and okay. Open for questions. Okay. Open for questions. We'll stop the recording.